If you're into podcasts, you should check out our podcast, Criminally Listed Presents Into the Killing. It's about cold cases that were eventually solved. New episodes are released every other week. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Number 3. Shanghai Tunnels, Portland, Oregon. The streets of Portland, Oregon hold sinister stories below. For 50 years, underground tunnels were used to deliver items from ships to businesses. At night, legend says they were used for human trafficking. The tunnels run through the historic downtown to the Willamette River. From 1850 to 1941, Portland was known as the Forbidden City of the West and considered dangerous. Police, politicians, and businesses took part or turned a blind eye to capturing people and selling them. Men were sold to ships for free labor, and women were kidnapped and sent to other cities for sex trafficking. The tunnels were connected to the basements of dance halls, saloons, brothels, and gambling parlors. The White Eagle Saloon and Brothel and the Merchant Hotel are just two of the businesses that took part. The human traffickers were called crimps. Crimps would pick customers at these businesses, schmooze them, and load them up with booze or drugs, and then lead them away from the crowd. They would get the victim to stand over a trapdoor, which would drop them into the tunnels. Men were waiting below who would take the victim's shoes off. The ground was lined with broken glass. The victims couldn't run away, and if they did, there was a trail of blood to find them. The victims were then dragged into a holding cell. Once the ship was about to leave, the traffickers would give the captives a drink laced with drugs, making them easier to move onto the ships. The captors would receive $50 for each person. In 1850, $50 was the equivalent of about $1,900 today. Thousands of people a year were said to have fallen into this underground scheme. Many people are said to have died in the tunnels due to starvation, harsh treatment, and overdoses. As for the women, crimps would pretend to be missionaries or police. They would prey on women who were new to town. They would recommend a boarding house or a hotel. Once the women checked in, they would be drugged and held captive in the underground cells. There were underground opium dens and illegal bars in the tunnels during Prohibition. The speakeasies were usually run by mobsters who sometimes got into turf wars. During this time, legend has it that some of the women held captive were put on ships and sent to brothels in other cities or countries. It's called a legend because historians and archaeologists say they haven't found concrete evidence of human trafficking. But paranormal investigators supposedly have. Bob Chamberlain is with the Northwest Paranormal Investigations Group. In the 2000s, he and two others were preserving old boots found in the tunnel. A brick was thrown at them by something invisible and missed his head by an inch. Visitors hear disembodied screams, groans, squeaking cell doors, heavy breathing, grunts, and whips cracking. The ghosts of crimps are said to haunt the tunnels. They appear as dark shadows. The Ghost Adventures crew investigated the tunnels using a spirit box. The spirit box flips through radio frequencies quickly. Normally, there's just white noise, but it's believed that the words that come through are spirits communicating. The crew tried communicating with Nina, a ghost believed to have been captured and forced into sex trafficking. In the early 1900s, missionaries were trying to clean up what's now called Old Town neighborhood. They approached Nina and asked her for information about illegal activity in exchange for being freed. Nina agreed and told the police the identities of her captors. But she was never freed. Her captors found out she had revealed their identities. She was summoned to a room in the hotel, attacked, and thrown down the elevator shaft of the former Merchant Hotel, which is now the Old Town Pizza Shop. Nina is seen in a black dress in Old Town Pizza, especially in the area where the elevator shaft used to be. Sometimes visitors smell her perfume, hear the swishing of her skirt, or hear her whisper. One time, the restaurant staff left a bowl of Scrabble letters out overnight. The next day, the letters were arranged on the table, but they didn't spell out a clear message. The Ghost Adventures crew called for Nina's spirit to talk to them. Then a woman's voice came through and said,
"Where are you?"
She said,
"He's mine. He fell."
Remember, victims were chosen and then led to the trapdoor. Right after, investigator Zach Bagans saw an apparition of a woman. Then the woman's voice said,
"Let's get naked."
Bagans asked, "What were you doing when you were Shanghaied?" A man's voice came through and said, "I was wasted. Then I was beaten." Bagans also caught on camera what looks like a torso move. The tunnels were used for these dark activities until the Second World War. In 1941, the tunnels were locked up. The Cascade Historical Society discovered the tunnels in 1995. The group excavated, preserved, and restored a segment of the tunnels. In 2013, the group opened a museum of the Shanghai tunnels. They are called the Shanghai tunnels because Shanghaiing was a term used to describe kidnapping men and forcing them to work on ships. At the time of this video, the Cascade Historical Society has lost access to the section of the tunnel it restored due to COVID and the buildings changing ownership. The group is restoring another part of the underground and asking for donations. Number 2, Waverly Hills, Kentucky. Tuberculosis, also known as TB, ravaged the world in the 1900s. TB was one of the two leading causes of death in the early 1900s. The other was pneumonia. Louisville, Kentucky had one of the highest rates of TB deaths in the U.S. That's why the Waverly Hills Sanatorium opened there in 1910. The two-story building had 50 patients, but it quickly reached capacity. So in 1926, the building expanded to 5 stories and 400 patients. It's so big that Waverly Hills is a self-contained community. It even has its own zip code. The community had a post office, butchery, and radio station. A treatment for TB wouldn't be invented for another decade. So many patients would never see the outside of the Waverly Hills community again. It's estimated that 6,000 people died within its walls. Some say tens of thousands died. Before there was a cure, doctors experimented with treatments. Fresh air was thought to be a possible cure, so patients were placed on open porches, even in winter. Doctors would sometimes remove ribs to collapse a diseased lung. But these treatments didn't always go well. Patients who didn't survive were sent down the body chute, also called the death tunnel. The underground tunnel connected the first floor of the main building to the basement of the original hospital. It was 525 feet long and it went to the bottom of the hill. Bodies were transported with a rail car system. They were collected by family or cremated. The bodies were transported underground so patients couldn't see the corpses. Staff wanted to keep morale up, even though it's hard to believe that there was hope at all. Today, about 425 feet of tunnel remain, and it's haunted. Patrick McQuarrie and Jason Spence from the Haunted Side Paranormal Investigations YouTube went into the death tunnel, just the two of them. They heard a hiss in the tunnel, then one of their flashlights turned off in their hand. They were using an obulus to communicate with spirits. The Ovilus has a word bank, so spirits can pick a word and the machine will read it aloud. Their Ovilus said,
No!
Investigators from the show Paranormal Lockdown spent 72 hours at Waverly Hills. Paranormal investigator Nick Groff slept alone in the body chute. He set up motion-activated lights while he slept. The lights are off unless something moves directly on top of them. While you're sleeping, the lights turned on.
I just heard something. Hello?
Groff woke up and heard something shuffling down the tunnel toward him.
I heard something walking.
The rest of the building is haunted too. Visitors see the ghost of a doctor around the treatment area of the former sanatorium. He is wearing a white coat. A little girl is seen running around the third-floor solarium where people were kept in the sun. A 6-year-old boy named Timmy is said to have passed away at the hospital. He now plays pranks on visitors. He's also said to roll a ball along the floor. Visitors smell cooking food in the kitchen and freshly baked bread in the cafeteria and see a man in a white outfit. Doors slam and people hear footsteps when no one else is around. The 5th floor used to have a nurse station. Legend says that a 29-year-old nurse was found hanging in room 502 in 1928. She was unmarried and pregnant. In 1932, a nurse jumped from the 5th floor patio and died upon impact. Rumors say she was pushed to her death. Since then, people see shadow figures and hear disembodied voices on the 5th floor. Today, the sanatorium hosts regular paranormal investigations that anyone can sign up for, including private, overnight investigations. Number 1. The Clausland Mountain Tunnels, Rockland County, New York. Entering underground tunnels through a rotting tree. It sounds like something out of Alice in Wonderland. The creepy crawlies you'll meet inside the tunnels aren't that far off from the twisted creatures in the Wonderland. The tunnels below Blauvelt State Park in Rockland County were built in the early 1900s as part of Camp Bluefields. It was the training grounds for the National Guard. The tunnels allowed the Guard to move between rifle shooting ranges without getting hurt. But bullets at these ranges would ricochet over the mountain and land on homes. Many homes were set on fire and people complained, so the facility was shut down until the First World War. Then Camp Bluefields became a training grounds for up to 30,000 troops between 1914 and 1918. After the war, Camp Bluefields was shut down and the area was handed over to the state. The buildings were demolished, but the tunnels remained, and so do the countless stories of paranormal and satanic activity. In 1984, college students drove by the mountain at night. They came across people in robes who were blocking the road. The students were forced to stop the car. The students heard a woman screaming next to the row of figures. The row of figures came towards the car with weapons in hand. Not willing to find out what would happen next, the driver stepped on the gas pedal and the students got out of there. The students told the police about the incident and they investigated, but they found nothing. Another time, someone named Ralph Sinisi and 4 of his friends explored the tunnels at around 3 a.m. The group found a room with a noose hanging from the ceiling. They left the tunnels and got out on top of the tunnels outside. They were starting to relax and drink some beers. Then they heard a loud, inhuman scream coming from the trees. The sound appeared to come towards them. They stood up, dropped their beers, and ran through the forest in the dark. They made it safely back to the car and peeled out there. At the bottom of the mountain, they came across ambulances and police cars, and a horrific scene. There had been a terrible car collision. Blood covered the road. They saw 2 human legs on their own, detached from a body. The group agreed that the scream they heard was the soul of the person leaving their body, reverberating up the mountain. Mark Milico believes that the entrance through the rotting tree is evil. He said that near the entrance there's a portal to another world. He said that the wind blows straight out the wall even though there's no hole. He also said there's an apparition of a soldier who lost his mind and killed his platoon. The spirit causes people to feel intense anger. It also gives people headaches. His friends are Wiccans and try to exorcise the evil spirit. During their exorcism, one of his friends became weak and they felt the spirit get enraged. They got scared and ran away. But before they could get out of the tunnels, the spirit shoved them so hard that they moved several feet. Then the spirit grabbed a walking stick out of one of their hands and threw it about 10 feet away. People say that people have died by suicide in the tunnels, that mobs dump bodies there, and that the police avoid the tunnels because of the satanic cults who operate there. An explorer even found a shrine of candles in one of the underground chambers. What is known is that the dark, dingy tunnels, covered in graffiti, are mysterious enough to have made them legendary. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. We'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. Thanks again for watching.